being in the industrial field, scientific analyst, what was the call that pulled you from that to ministry, and how did that scientific analyst inform your faith? How do you see science and God, if you will, connecting?
Yeah, I was probably called to the ministry in high school, but I was scared to death to speak in public. And so in any kind of way, I mean, it was not my thing, and so I wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer. But I did know this: if you were a preacher, you had to speak in front of people at least 3 times a week, and I said, I'm not doing that. And so again, and God was gracious and kind, and He let me say no momentarily. So sent me to the Air Force Academy, again, as I said, which had such a formative and shaping impact on my life in all kinds of ways, to include my faith and experiences that He would later remind me of. And so fast forward, I'm a second lieutenant, I'm a runner, and so much of my meditation and praying and thoughts happen when I'm running. And as I'm running as a second lieutenant, God brought me back to Exodus chapter 3, where Moses has this conversation with a burning bush that he knows is God. And so in this conversation, Moses is making all the excuses that I was making, and God finally says to Moses, all right, you're going to do this. I mean, so you can keep whining and complaining, but you're going to do this. And so that's the voice of God that I heard as I'm running, is, okay, Lord, I'll do this. I don't know what it means. And He took care of it. You know, I started going to school and got a couple of degrees along the way that I could transfer into an MDiv. And at the 6-year point, we laid a fleece before the Lord, and we said to the Lord, we said, God, if you want, I'm called to be a chaplain, if you want us to stay in the Air Force, which was going to be impossible, if you want us to stay in the Air Force, and then you're going to have to put us near a seminary, because this was before the internet. You know, there was no such thing as online education, you know, and I had taken all the hours that Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary was going to take by extension. So it's a 96-hour program. They only accepted 8 hours of extension work. And so, but I was able to get enough residential credits along the way, and so I showed up and was able to finish the education there and become a chaplain at the 10-year point, which had to happen by 10 years because of the competitive category transfer rules, and it happened with about 2 weeks to spare. I was able to move from the line to the chaplaincy.
Wow. Talk about God specializing in things that seem impossible.
Impossible.
Wow.
Impossible. My endorser, my hoped for endorser, Southern Baptist Convention, all along the way, I would meet with them every time they came to campus. And so I was working at Texas Christian University as an ROTC instructor, and finishing the MDiv. I went to school at 7 in the morning, was at work by 8, 4 days a week. I went at lunch, I went at night. And finished up that way. And I told my endorser, I said, you know, I think God's called me to be a chaplain. I think He's called me to be a Southern Baptist chaplain, if you'll allow it. And I'm doing my best to finish the MDiv while I'm on active duty. And they said, that's impossible. You can't do that. I said, well, maybe it is, but what if it's not impossible? What if it happens? And they said, well, if you get closer, you come talk to us. And so I got closer and closer and closer, and it happened, and they eventually said, well, sorry, the line is too long. We can't accept you. You'll have to get out, go pastor a church, and then maybe you can come back in. I said, well, I think God's telling me something different than that. And so the endorser, Liberty Baptist Fellowship was my endorser, and I stayed with them until I retired.